Hi, welcome to the Migration Narratives Project Showcase. I'm Tiffany Pewitt, the Executive Director of the Institute for Diversity and Civic Life. And today we are going to start our webinar by highlighting the project, The Price of a Dream, which I incorrectly called the Cost of a Dream on our flyer, so apologies for that, with Katsuo Nishikawa and Kiku Huckle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kiku Huckle, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Pace University, and my colleague Katsuo Nishikawa Chavez is at Trinity in San Antonio, Texas. And our project was The Price of a Dream, which is a documentary film that we did. We went to central Mexico and interviewed 5 former dreamers, so young adults who used to live in the United States and have since relocated to Mexico. And so this project was born out of our interest in immigration and wanting to expand the research topic beyond this very US-centered focus. Stories in reality, as everybody here knows, are much larger than what happens once you cross the border and what happens within the United States. And so we wanted to ask, first of all, what interested us is, well, what happens when people leave, when either they're deported or they choose to leave to go back to a different country. And we're most interested in dreamers. So dreamers are people who were raised in the United States. So many believe themselves to be Americans, identify as Americans, they work, they go to school, they have families, they have jobs. So for all intents and purposes are American, and then because of politics or for other reasons are suddenly finding themselves living in a different country that they might have little familiarity with. In pursuing this project, we started to realize that when we talk about dreamers, we come up on this idea of the model immigrant. So it's really similar to the model minority that we see when we talk about Asian immigrants or Asian American citizens, where you act like the ideal and therefore you are theoretically worthy of better treatment than other people who don't, quote unquote, behave correctly. Dreamers are held up as this example amongst immigrants as well. Well, they're the ones that are doctors. They came here through no fault of their own. They're kind of held up on this pedestal. And it's these particular positive, in quotes, characteristics that then make them worthy and deserving of maybe possibly the chance of being able to stay and work in the United States, but not actually being able to have citizenship or being treated equally. So the damage that people don't understand from these minority model immigrant tropes is, one, is the expectation that you have to be this model. So you have to behave better than everybody else inside and outside of your group in order to be considered worthy of being treated with respect. And then also it's the expectation that if you don't fit that model trope, then you're not worthy of being here. And it's okay to just kind of discard you or kick you out. So then we also had this question when we're talking about, oh, let's talk about immigration outside the United States. Let's look at dreamers, this model immigrant trope. Well, what happens when they leave? What happens when they're deported? But then we recognized really quickly that not all immigrants are deported. A lot of them actually choose to leave. And so we wanted to investigate why. And then lastly, ask, well, what is life like for them now? Living in Mexico for this particular project, now that they're outside of the United States and they've been living in Mexico for the shortest amount of time of the people that we interviewed was 16 months, anywhere between 16 months to 5 or 8 years. What's life like for you now? So we traveled to central Mexico. We based ourselves out of León so that we could travel around to a few of the different cities where former dreamers are currently living, and conducted 5 interviews. These 5 people are all very, very different and with very, very different stories. One is now running an organization that specifically works to help people in this particular situation, former dreamers or former immigrants who are returning to Mexico, try to help them build a community, help them find footing in Mexico. Well, what are the things that you need to do in order to get established? Others are working in telework, losing the word, services, customer services type jobs. Some of them came there voluntarily. One was deported, but again, very, very different experiences all across the board. And one of the primary themes that we came to find through doing these interviews and talking with people is this growing recognition, well, not growing for them, but growing for us, recognition that the United States isn't actually the best place for everybody. And so some choose to leave. This isn't, when we think about policy making, we think the United States is the ideal. So what should we do to make it better for people to come here, which is totally valid. But our restrictive policies tend to have this motivating drive or motivating belief that the United States is the absolute best place. And of course, everybody wants to be here. And of course, everybody wants to stay. And of course, anybody who leaves would want to return because everything is better in the United States. We found that that's not actually the case, according to the people that we interviewed. All of them have made a new life in Mexico. They've all discussed how incredibly difficult it was, as it would be for anybody moving to a different location where you may or may not be really well versed in the language, where you may or may not have a lot of people that you know, where you may or may not have access to jobs or any kind of social support. So there are definitely difficulties, but they all said it's hard, but they're happy, and that none of them would want to return. So we can talk more about some of the individual interviews, but I did want to kind of touch on, well, what are our hopes and goals for this project now that it's been completed and now that we have this wonderful platform, thanks to the Migration Narratives Project and IDCL. First is we really just wanted to change the narrative around Dreamers in the United States. Really, we want to emphasize the fact that you don't need to be this model in order to deserve consideration for respect, that you don't need to be a model in order to deserve to stay in the United States and be a citizen, somebody who has a family and wants to work and be a normal citizen just like the rest of us. Second, we also wanted to highlight how lucky we as a country would be to have these people stay. They are not the primary beneficiaries of being able to stay. We actually are. So we're losing really good people because of this politicking that artificially inflates the need for immigrants to be this model gold standard of individuals, whether that be in workers or family life or whatever the case may be. And then lastly, we really wanted to pass on the message that all of our interviewees gave to us, which was they said, we want others to know who are living in the United States that might be in the same situation that we were, where you don't feel safe, where your future is uncertain, where you're not sure if your family is going to be okay, that it's okay, that there is a good life possible for you outside of the United States, that the United States doesn't have to be the be all and the end all, that it is possible to be happy. Katsuo, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I thank you, Kiku, for that. I would add that there's a really interesting story also here about the families that are separated. Each one of them echoed a sentiment about, I don't want to go back and live in the US, but I do want to visit my family. And there are a lot of, these are stories also of families that are separated by politicking, right? It's, you can hear it in the voices of the people that we talk to. Their voice cracks, right? When they think about their mom, their dad, siblings, the people that they cannot visit anymore. And so this is a real tragedy, right? The price of it is really high for these young people. And in some cases, the people who are choosing to leave, they're leaving because of family, right? In one case, one of the partners is deported, and the partner who's left in the US, she travels to Mexico because she wants her children to grow up with a father. And so the human tragedy of these stories is, it really speaks to a need to address this issue and fix DACA and create a new way forward. Recently, a study came out, and I really liked a quote from that study that said, "DACA is the floor, not the ceiling." Right? This is from where we start building, and we need to think about how to create opportunities for our society, right, to incorporate young, talented Americans, people who really love this country. And thank you to IDCL for their support and believing in us.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And you can watch their documentary, Price of a Dream. I put the link in the chat. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's really powerful and moving. And you all have done some really wonderful and amazing work. Next up, we have Menaka Chandurkar and from AFSSA, who's going to share survivors, immigrant stories from ATX.
Hi all, thanks for having me. It's just great to be part of this group and part of this cohort, because in case you don't know, there are many more migration narrative projects than the few highlighted here. I think they're going to do future sessions, and just the depth and the breadth of the stories being told is really inspiring. So I work at AFSSA, Asian Family Support Services of Austin, and we are a nonprofit based in Austin, but we work in 10 counties in Central Texas, and we support immigrant and Asian survivors of domestic and sexual violence and trafficking. We partnered with American Gateways, which is a legal services organization that specializes in immigration law, to tell the stories in some short films of 2 survivors of violence who came to the US and their journeys. You know, for us, we want to tell this, first of all, if somebody's coming here in a situation where they are literally running for their lives, chances are along the way, they're experiencing some form of this violence. And what we really wanted to do was highlight the barriers that immigrant survivors face, especially if they're undocumented coming into this country when they're trying to access services or support. And it's the gamut. I mean, the 2 stories we ended up telling, one is a woman named Asha, and she and her family were persecuted for religious reasons in India. And they ended up leaving. She and her husband ended up leaving. They were essentially ended up in a labor trafficking situation in Peru. They were there for a few years. They had their daughter. They finally were able to get to the Mexico-US border. Then they ended up getting detained when they went to cross, and eventually, you know, and the film is, I think, about 8 or 9 minutes long. That is a third of what this family went through. The other story is Gertrude. She came here to the US again, leaving a violent, life-threatening situation. She was 6 months pregnant. She landed in Houston, got on a bus, went to Austin. Somewhere along the way, she was in distress. She was in pain. She went to the ER. Unbeknownst to her, she was carrying triplets. She thought she only had one baby, and one had her life at risk, and they had to get them all out. So this is a woman who did not speak the language, was undocumented. She was terrified about this team that was just gonna take her babies out. You know, she didn't understand the reasoning, and she was wondering, like, are these nefarious American doctors trying to do something to me? So kind of the barriers that we always try to highlight in our work are, and the huge one, and I think the most obvious, is language access, right? So anyone reaching out for services, chances are there's going to be, if they're limited English proficiency, they can't express themselves fully. They can't receive and process information fully. It's very disorienting. So that's one of the barriers. A lack of understanding of the systems here, and a lack of trust, you know, whether there's trauma from their home countries or they've come here and they've interacted with our criminal justice system and have experienced trauma through that. There's just, you know, not being able to work, the immigration issue. We have a lot of survivors who are our clients. We serve survivors of all genders from all over the world. Our name is Asian Family Support Services. We were started as a South Asian organization 30 years ago in 1992. And I think organically, because we had this idea of being culturally grounded, which is having people on staff who are from the immigrant cultures, who understand the kind of social and family dynamics, understand these barriers, and really center somebody's culture. It's like, it's not an aside, it's like, it's the center in the terms of like when we're helping a survivor move away to safety and be on a healing journey. And because of that, organically, we started to see a lot of immigrants from outside South Asia, so across Asia. Changed our name to Asian Family Support Services of Austin. And honestly now, because again, we have this reputation of being culturally grounded and really centering our clients' identities, all of them, we see clients from all over. So we see survivors from Africa, from Latin America, from the Middle East, as well as across Asia. And we have clients who are born and raised here, and some are second generation, and they still appreciate kind of the understanding of the immigrant communities and dynamics. Some are like Caucasian, born and raised here, and they found us, and we're a comfortable place for them to begin their healing journey. So what we really wanted to do was to make films and to tell stories that would help us educate not only the general population, but especially these mainstream agencies that interact with survivors. So shelters, law enforcement, the court systems, medical practices and hospitals, to kind of put them in the shoes of people who are fleeing violence and to experience the barriers that they reach. I always say, we shouldn't have to do the work to humanize immigrants. Like, immigrants are humans. That should be the default. We all understand. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people who just haven't done that work, or because of the xenophobia or their just lack of comfort interacting with immigrants, they kind of just do, the other them as a default, and they don't ever think, what would make me leave for instance, my suburban home, and just take a journey where I don't know what's happening, leave everyone I know, leave everything I know with barely anything, and journey on this place where I know I will encounter danger, and what would force that? And I really think a lot of people have not put the narrative of like, these people are just coming here to take advantage of us is so prevalent that they don't take a moment to put themselves in the shoes of the people who are making that journey. The other thing that was really important to us is to make sure everything we do is trauma informed in terms of telling stories. So I have a background in documentary film and human rights documentary film. And I think, we're not going to do cutting edge films, because what we want to do in terms of filmmaking, because the thing that's important to us is really empowering those survivors to tell their story. They've had their agency taken away from them. They've had their autonomy and their power taken away. And we want to make sure every step of the way, to the point where I think they get a little tired of me asking and checking again and again, we want them to be the decision makers. So they don't want their faces seen, fine. They don't want shots of inside their home, fine. They don't want their kids, fine. Like being in there, fine. They want to leave out certain parts of their story, that's fine. And that's kind of the main thing too. I don't want to go through a thing where they have to the burden of proof that they're survivors is on them. That shouldn't be the thing. We don't need a lot of details. I think it's really important to just be like, you are a survivor, you identify as a survivor. Let's take that as the starting point of the story and go. Sometimes folks do like to kind of just detail a lot of what happened to them, and that's kind of part of their process. But very rarely will I put that into a film or a story. I think there's just, and we see it in a lot of the communications and the storytelling, however well-intentioned, around survivors, is that to really get into the grisly details of what this person experienced in their trauma. And I just don't think that's necessary. And it kind of, again, it feeds into this idea that they have to prove to us that they're worthy of our notice and our help. And they're worthy of us recognizing their humanity, which they are humans, they have humanity. So we kind of just start with that. You are a survivor. Okay, let's go forward and talk about your journey and whatever you're comfortable talking about. And if, there's a thing that in documentary filmmaking you don't normally do is show the subjects a cut of the film before it's done. I do the opposite. Like I want them to be like, no, I don't want that in there. That makes me uncomfortable. Actually, I look even down to like, oh, I look kind of funny in that shot. Okay, fine. Because the whole idea is that they should see the film and feel empowered. And a lot of them are moved to tell the story in if they know it's going to help other people like them. So if they know that it's going to help change systems they've interacted with, and however small, systems advocacy is a huge undertaking, but however, if we can do a training with one law enforcement department or one court system or victim service advocates or whatever. And then they want people to reach out if they need support too, to tell them there are agencies that can help you. You're not alone. Please reach out, because that's how I got the help. And American Gateway is an amazing piece of that too, because both of the survivors that we featured in our stories have asylum cases with American Gateways. Oh, that was a fast 9 minutes. So another burden that we find for survivors is that they are so afraid of being deported. Their kids are born here. They know that if they stick their neck out, there's a chance they could get deported and be separated from their children. So there are just so many barriers. And I think both the stories distill, and again, both the stories are like a fraction of what happened to these folks, distill in a relatable way that journey and the barriers that survivors face, and why we should, treat them like humans. It's not that radical of an idea, or it shouldn't be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And again, I encourage all of you, I put the link in the chat, so please do follow that link and check out this, this really important work and hear these stories. Next up, we're going to hear from Lubna Zeidan from Interfaith Action of Central Texas. And we'll hear about their project, in their words, the truth about the refugee experience in America.
Hi, everyone. This is such a wonderful group to be a part of. These stories are amazing. My name is Lubna Zeidan. A lot of you know me by Lou. I've been working with Interfaith Action of Central Texas for close to 20 years. We are an organization whose mission is to bring people of all faiths together so that they can remove the barriers to understanding each other, so that we're all like just a big human family, if at all possible. We have a service program, that's the Refugee program, and I'm the co-director of that. We teach English to refugees. We are the official ESL provider for newly arrived refugees in Austin. And so newly arrived refugees are referred to us immediately, but we are not the first people who see them when they arrive. It's the resettlement agencies. And so they don't necessarily tell us their stories, which is fine with us because it's traumatizing enough for them to have to tell those stories over and over again to be able to be resettled in the US. And that's one thing that happens all the time. So we were glad to do this project to ask them about life in America and not about their life back home, knowing that whatever their life was back home, it would affect how they view us and how they view this community. Refugees, for those of you who may not know, have come from violence, from war. They are victims, and they have to apply to leave either their country where they're escaping. They may be displaced within their country. They may have run out of their country to another country. And that's the official definition of a refugee, is someone who had to leave their country for fear of persecution. They usually, many of them have been in third countries. Now, their situation there is always pretty precarious. They're not allowed the freedom to move, the freedom to work. Their kids usually are not allowed to go to school. They're living on the margins, and at any small mistake, or if they're caught, they're deported back to war-torn countries. So they have lived in danger, and they have lived, on the edges of civilization throughout their journey out of the war-torn country. Now, when they come to the US, they're coming as resettled refugees legally, and there's a long, 2-year-long process that I won't tire you with. So for anybody who thinks that it's just easy, it really isn't. And those of us who work with immigrants and refugees know that just coming to the US is so darn complicated. Nobody can just choose to come and easily get here. So for refugees, a lot of hoops to jump through. They have to prove that they're persecuted. They have to prove that their whole family is in danger. Sometimes that proof is pretty obvious, sometimes it's not. When they come here, they are taken care of by different organizations. They're helped to get jobs, to get started, and then they are on their own. So they get services, initial services, for 9 months. Then for 5 years, they can always refer back, but really, truly, they don't get a lot of help after that 9 months, because agencies are overcrowded and, everybody's stretched pretty thin. When they come to us to learn English, these are adults who never thought they would have to learn again, never thought they'd be in a classroom again. So it's difficult enough for them to be in a classroom. And so they feel a little bit childish to be in that situation. And really, if you speak a language as a second language, no matter how fluent you are, you still feel like a child sometimes because you can't think of those adult words as fast as you could in your native tongue. So they are already, under pressure to learn the language and to get better. And with all the difficulties and the challenges of being in the US, job security problems, housing costs, language barriers, and learning English takes at least a couple of years if you're going to school regularly. So they have a lot of challenges. So we knew that, and we knew that refugees specifically are different from immigrants because they have no choice. When they come here, it's not a choice they made. They choose to be resettled. They were accepted in the US. So they're not coming to, take away anything that we have. They just want to survive and live. We knew that there were barriers there, that there were problems, that politically and socially, our communities sometimes are pretty harsh on outsiders who don't know how to fit in immediately and make money and be successful. But yeah, ideally, if any of us is thrown into, Kinshasa or Damascus or anywhere, we're not going to be able to be successful either. So we should at least be a little more realistic in viewing this. When we decided to do this film, we thought we wanted to ask about their impression of the US. And we thought we were going to hear a lot of negative things. That, it's so hard getting a job. It's so hard trying to keep American culture in the forefront of your mind. That is being punctual, being calling when you need to call, the barriers we have between people that, if you know somebody at work, that doesn't mean they're your friend. You invite them to your daughter's birthday party. There's a lot of cultural things that they're not aware of that we never really think about when we're dealing with outsiders. So we thought, okay, there's going to be a lot of negatives, and we just want to hear what those negatives are. To our surprise, it wasn't the case, because refugees have been through so many harsh situations and have always been treated as outsiders, have always been treated as criminals, have never been given a chance. So just by the fact that they come here and, people may choose to say a bad word to them or ignore them or neglect them or tell them they have to work harder, they don't see that as a big problem, which we thought was very interesting. That what we see as possible discrimination in the community, they just took it in stride. Okay, that's fine. I have a roof over my head. I am free to go and come as I please. Nobody's stopping me. There's nothing to complain about. So what they saw as interesting about community was very interesting to us, and we did not foresee it. Also, we interviewed, by the way, 24 different refugees speaking 7 different languages. And that presented its own logistical nightmare that we hadn't foreseen either. And we had initially thought, okay, it's COVID days. We put everybody together. and do Zoom meetings and get interpreters. Yeah, it didn't work that way. It's never easy to get several people to have the same schedule at the same time, plus interpreters in their own, because we use them all the time. But again, when you think about it, you're translating so many languages at the same time. If you have several people with different languages, it became not doable. So we changed our strategy with that. We still used a lot of Zoom meetings, but it was more like 1 or 2 people at a time, speaking one language with an interpreter. And then we had to do captions with interpreters working for us later on. Again, so the planning we did not foresee it in the right way. But the film is wonderful too, because I have 1 minute, because we also spoke to young people, and young people who are in school, they have the negative view of what happened in their lives because at the age and what they're going through. But again, here, if you're an outsider, you're going to get bullied, and refugees got bullied as well. So it's a very interesting view of refugees. Please watch it. And thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lou. And again, that link is in the chat, so please take the time to go through this. Really impressive and an amazing piece. So next up, and our final project that we'll be showcasing today comes from Marcia Clark, and this is called Navigating Migration and Faith, Narratives from Jamaican Women.
Thanks so much, Tiffany, for the opportunity to be on this webinar, and also thanking the Institute of Diversity and Civic Life and the Henry Luce Foundation for their great support. My name is Marcia Clark. As Tiffany has said, I teach for Vanguard University. I'm a member of the International Catholic Pentecostal Dialogue, and also co-chair for Practical Theology for the Society of Pentecostal Studies. And my work with the IDCL focused on the migration stories of Jamaican women, with a particular interest in those that have come from a Pentecostal background. Pentecostalism presently is one of the largest growing, or the quickest growing expressions of Christian faith in the world right now. And in Jamaica in particular, the majority of its Christian adherents are Pentecostals. And so Pentecostalism in particular, and Christianity in general, does influence the Jamaican story and the Jamaican narrative. And I wanted to hear particularly from women, and those of you who know about Pentecostalism or have done any work in Pentecostalism will see that for women, Pentecostalism is an empowering expression of faith. And so I was interested in how the faith aspect of migration, as well as the gendered aspect of migration, played into the story. I'm excited to be able to present the narratives of women, because these narratives often get subsumed within the narratives of males in general. And I'm excited to look at the narratives of Jamaican women as Black women within the American context. Jamaicans as Black people often get subsumed within the African-American story. And so the particularity of their story is often lost. And so it's exciting for me to be able to bring that story to the fore. And so I had the opportunity to have initially 7 people as part of the project, 3 who were older, who came to the States, or migrated to Texas in the 70s and 80s, and the 4 who came a little bit later. So that was going to be such an exciting contrast. And unfortunately, the 3 older women at the very last minute decided that they did not want to be part of the project. And why? And it's something that I found, those of you that do research know that researching minority groups is difficult of itself. And I came to the conclusion with other work that I've done that having researchers that they see some connection within themselves makes sharing their story easier. So my thought, okay, I'm Black, my parents are from a Jamaican background, there is this connection, and one of them was a family member. So when I worked out why they didn't want to take part in the project, some of it had to do with the amount of writing that I had presented them for permission to share their story. When I realized that once you put it down on paper and it becomes official and you're asking them to sign it, there is a sense of being of fear, I guess, because it becomes official. It moves from being a conversation to something that's being official. So that's something as a researcher that I need to think about for future projects. Also, and I understand that many of them felt that they had nothing to say. They came as unskilled workers, and some of them are still working well into their 80s, 70s, and 80s, and felt that they being cleaning or having unskilled work, they felt that then their narrative was not important. So this is something, again, to what can I do as a researcher to empower and to make people or help people who feel that their story isn't important to bring that out. So the 4 women that continued were almost the other end of the spectrum. I was saying, look, we don't need to show your faces. We don't need to use your name. No, you can show my face. No, you can use my name. So it was a complete other, but I still chose to sort of keep them. Still chose not to use all their faces, even though I used some, but not all of them. 3 of them came to the US through HBCU, through Prairie View? It was interesting because I spoke to women who were Jamaicans but had a Texan drawl, and forever I kept on thinking, is it Prairie View? I was working out what it is, but I eventually worked out that it's Prairie View and HBCU in Texas, and 3 of them were able to win places at this HBCU. And so looking at the place of HBCUs within the migration narrative is also, I thought, something else that we can look at. It would be interesting for further study. So one of them went on to actually complete her degree. The other 2 weren't able to complete due to financial issues. They just weren't able to pay for their college work, and ended up leaving, finding work. One actually went back, and both of them went back. One went back to Prairie View and finished a master's degree. Another one finished off her bachelor's at another institution. One of the other participant came through marriage. So her husband was born and bred in Houston, though of Jamaican parentage, and she got married and was able to come to the States through them. Interestingly, the 3 that went to Prairie View, One actually, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Two came through scholarships. Both of them came to do agriculture studies with the intention to go back to Jamaica and to develop agriculture in their area, to open farms, to teach. And the other one, she actually came as a young girl. She came at the age of 7, and she makes it clear, I had no choice in the matter. You know, my parents were coming, and so I came. And so when I spoke to her about her thoughts about Jamaica, about America, as has already been said by a previous speaker, she said America was larger than life, right? She had in her mind that Lou Ferrigno, the green, incredible Hulk, walked around as a normal person. And so, and so she was expecting, when I get to America, I'll be able, you know, there'll be this Lou Ferrigno character who will turn into the Incredible Hulk and who will, you know, make all things good. And she said she had this idea that everybody lived in great houses and had big houses, and everything was good. And when she got here, she was excited, but recognized that her thought of what America was completely different. The one lady that came through marriage experienced violence, domestic violence, and other relationship violence, and often felt that she should have stayed. Maybe she made the wrong decision in coming to the States. But overall, the feeling was that if you work it, you can make it. But no one is giving you much help. You have to make it work for yourself. And lots to say about the place of faith, which continues to play a great role in all of their lives. And if you want to know more, please watch the video clip. It's quite short, just to give you a taste of, or the video, actually not the clip, the video. It's quite short, but it'll give you a taste of the project. Thanks so much again, Tiffany and IDCL.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Marcia. And I'm so excited that everyone has been able to share their projects. For those of you who are joining us today, I think you can see that that the Migration Narratives Projects includes this really big range of different approaches to thinking about migration. We put them together, and I want to share this link with you. We put them into an exhibit, and that link is right here, where you can see all of them. We'll be hosting another webinar event Wednesday, February 23rd, to share more projects with you. And taken all together, we think this creates this large conversation about the complexities of migration and immigration experiences. But I want to open up now to questions from those of you who have joined us. So you can put those questions in the chat if anyone has any. Maybe you're thinking about the questions you would like to ask. So in the meantime, as you think about questions that you may want to ask, I have a question for all of our cohort members, for anyone who wants to speak up and respond to this. And that question is, in your work, as you put together these projects, what really surprised you the most? What was most unexpected?
I can, are we going to go in the same order we went in?
Sure, sure.
Okay, I'm happy to jump in. One of the interesting things that came up was the change in and status of migrants. Migration tends to be a young person's game, and one of the reasons older people don't migrate is because if they do, they lose their status, right? They go from being engineers to cab drivers, etc. And in this case, we saw the opposite, right? When migrants left the U.S., well, you know, it's a dichotomous, right? But they felt that they had higher status because they felt like they had a high school degree that meant something. And it was really surprising for them to talk about how their US high school degree has opened doors for them in Mexico. Like they are now office workers, right? They work in call centers or in other places where their English is used professionally. And they moved from the shadows, from working in kitchens and construction sites to being somebody who works in an office. And that jump in status was a big thing. And at the same time, they felt that their Mexican neighbors saw them with suspicion because they thought of them as they must have done something wrong to get deported, right? That there was a criminality involved in their actions. So it was a very interesting dichotomy there that migration creates for them in their identity.
That's
Can I
really
add just one little thing too? Sorry. The other thing another question that we kind of had in the background was, how does this relate to political participation? Because we're both political scientists. And what we found was that almost across the board, everybody that we spoke to was really excited about getting engaged in politics, because they're like, well, this is our country now, and we're allowed to. And we automatically have this access. I always forget what the card is. I forget what the
INE card.
INE card. That is such a foreign concept to me as an American, that you're automatically given this card that means you can participate politically. So they're like, yeah, now that we actually have a voice, we're citizens, I'm going to learn more. I'm going to engage more. I really do think I should get involved.
Can I jump in and introduce myself and ask some questions?
Yeah, could we just let the rest of the panelists?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then we'll jump over to you. Yeah, thank you.
Can I go?
So in terms of,
You got this.
oh, you can go ahead. Are you sure? Oh, Zoom life. You think after almost 2 years we'd get this down, but it is what it is. I think for me, a good reminder, we think of AFSSA, we're not a huge nonprofit. I think of us as being really scrappy and really working hard for the communities and the clients we represent. And to be reminded through this process that there's a power dynamic there. We sit at a lot of tables where we're kind of representing our communities and kind of fielding microaggressions as an agency. And so I think we always have this idea that, like, oh, well, we're the small fish. But then with clients and with community, we're gatekeepers. I mean, we do our best to do right by them, but at the same time, like, they feel an obligation to us, and we should be always really mindful of that power dynamic. So I think for me, just to understand that, hey, like, people may say yes, but they might say yes because even though we're coming to them after they're past the crisis point, I mean, that's really important, that they're not in an active crisis, that they've moved past and are settled, just for all sorts of reasons, if they're going to share their story. Just to be mindful that there is still that they still feel kind of an obligation to us as an agency that supports them and has supported them in the past. And so to realize that, yeah, as much as we try, we also hold power in this relationship. We also are a gatekeeper because we're plugged into mainstream systems, and because we sit at these tables. So that was a really good reminder. And just, I mean, honestly, like, I knew that there were people who are not from Latin America coming through the US-Mexico border, but to hear about this Indian family, I mean, that came through Peru, it just made me think about all the people who made that journey, and kind of, again, addressing that model minority thing. One of the ways that hurts API immigrant communities is that because we're quote unquote a model minority, there aren't a lot of services available for us because we're kind of written off as, yeah, they're fine. So just to kind of really explore that and explore what these folks have gone through. It was really eye-opening.
Lou, did you want to share next?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of little things that we tend to take for granted, some aspects of our community or our culture that we don't necessarily see them as valuable. But refugees did see them and acknowledge them. And one thing, for example, an Afghan woman speaks about how wonderful it is that people smile at her kids, that people stop and talk to kids and smile at them. And it gives her kids such confidence, because in her country, the only people who care about those kids are their families, and everybody else don't seem to care. Another woman talked about how if she's distressed, all she has to do is go to a park and she can relax. And just the fact that parks are free and available was like a big deal. And these are things that we forget sometimes about the valuable parts of our community that outsiders appreciate.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think so many pieces. It was just an exciting project in that just being able to share with this group. I met the women individually, and also we came together for a sort of focus group conversation, and just the energy that was in the room as they bounced off one another and shared their stories. One of the things I found interesting, my experience of Pentecostal faith has been a relatively positive one. I mean, there's things to do with ordination, all that sort of thing, but that's another issue. But, and work that I've done in the past, the experience of the women that I've spoke to in England has been quite a positive experience of faith. But hearing in at least two of the stories of abuse that came from leaders in the church, both sexual and emotional abuse that took place, that again, it was surprising, and something that particularly within the Black community, I'm not sure, Jamaican community, let me use that, I'm not sure if that is given any airing, maybe because that there is, I think, within the Jamaican community a sort of honor code, that these things happen, but we don't really air them. So to have that aspect brought out in my work was surprising, interesting, something to look further into.
Thank you. Tamara, did you want to ask your question now? Thank you for your patience.
No problem. Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to introduce myself. I actually was introduced to this group through Sadia, and I work with a nonprofit in New Mexico, in rural New Mexico, that helps asylum seekers. And so since 2019, we've helped get over 10,000 asylum seekers to their sponsors after they've gone through the system. Some of the things that I was listening to specifically when Menaka and Lou were talking were about that whole discussion process with the immigrants, of asking the questions and, you know, taking the trauma-informed care approach and asking those questions in a way that gives them the autonomy. And the specific thing that I heard, and I think it was you, Menaka, that said it, was about how they have to tell their story over and over and over, and it continues the trauma. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to launch a program. So I've been following you guys simply because I'm trying to learn from all of you how you structured all of this and how you tackled your projects, because we are trying to launch a narrative project in the next few months. And so what were some of your biggest challenges in terms of getting the stories, not that you needed to get, but that needed to be told, you know, the in terms of the practicalities, like how did you set that up? How did you build your program to go through those narrative interviews? Does that make sense? It's really the nuts and bolts of how this all worked.
Yes, I can take a stab. I think, Lubna, you go, because last time I went when we both unmuted. Go ahead.
We both know the same things, obviously. No, I was just going to say that it's very important to go one person at a time. That not take a group approach to because each person have their own questions and their own barriers and what they're afraid of. So we use interpreters to contact and talk to each person at a time and answer the questions and explain to them what the project is about. And if they say no, then it's no. Don't try to talk them into things. Even if they may be afraid of something that's unrealistic, like a lot of our clients would be afraid of, they're going to see it back in Congo. They won't, but can I guarantee they won't? I cannot guarantee they won't. So respect that. So I think that is one big issue. Menaka, how about?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Also, I think you're the one who was talking about telling the same story over and over, but that resonated with me because when we have survivors of domestic or sexual violence, they have to tell their story over and over again, right? So that whatever process they're going through, whatever systems they're accessing. And I would say the other thing is, yeah, I knew the biggest barrier for us to tell these stories would be identifying stories that we all felt comfortable telling. There's no shortage of stories, but we wanted someone, like you said, who's past the crisis point. If there was even a hint that something might be happening, that, some more trauma or some more issues surfacing, we didn't want to work with that person because, again, we made that call because we just felt like, let's not enter in again with this power dynamic where they might be dependent on us for some services and they feel like they have to say yes. Doing like multiple pre-interviews. So first interview is just first, and I usually will have the advocate who worked directly with that client because they have that relationship, approach them first, and then I will come into another meeting, and then we'll do another meeting where we go to their home or wherever we're shooting. I don't want the first time that they have to tell their story to be like with a crew. So just, to make sure that they feel confident. What some of them were like, can you just type out the questions? So I was like, well, it's kind of free flowing, but it's not like a very formal interview, but yes, like, fine, we'll put together some questions for you so you feel like there's a structure and you know what's happening. So just, yeah, all the steps, very individually based, the same thing.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'm sure we could spend a lot more time talking about these amazing projects, but we are reaching that hour point for our webinar. But thank you so much for joining us. Please do check out everyone's projects. I think, am I correct in saying that if folks go to these links that they could also find your contact information in case anyone wanted to reach out and ask you other questions about the work that you're doing? Is that probably right for everyone? So that, for instance, Tamara, if you wanted to ask more questions about people's projects, I think you can be in touch through their links. So thank you again. And please keep an eye out as well for, we'll post this recording on Facebook, but we'll also be posting about upcoming webinars, and stay tuned for more. So thank you all.